guys, so this is part 2 of our Instagram retrofit tutorial series, and in the first part we pretty much just discussed the project, the general basics and this general layout, and this is what we're kind of aiming for. So it's going to be an application which is going to be using the Instagram API to get media, tag-based media, and we just simply made we just put together, we register our application and we put together our constants file. And by the end of this video, hopefully what we're going to be working on throughout this video is we're going to be working on getting the authentication, or at least part of it. And yeah, so by the end of this video we will hopefully have gotten the initial code back from Instagram. So if you quickly just flip back here to the developer, oh, and just by the way, in between videos I realized that I'd actually put the wrong redirect URI for my website. I used the HTTPS secure protocol, but that's not the one obviously that I use on my website. So I pretty much just I made a new client and I edited the code. So if you're wondering why these information look a little bit different, it's just because I made the new client. You obviously do not need to do that. Also, in place of these codes, obviously you will be using your own client ID and client secret. So I'm just going to trust you on that one. Anyways, so coming back here on the authentication, what we need is, before we can start requesting data and pictures like this, what we need is an access token. Okay, so there's two ways of getting an access token, and I want you to maybe pause the video and go ahead and read this, because it's just going to help you. And it over here on the developer site, it tells you two ways of doing it. One of them is the explicit way and the other one is the implicit way, and in this tutorial we're going to be following the explicit way. Alright, so go ahead and read this, and as soon as you're back we can go ahead and continue with that. Alright, so assuming that you've gone ahead and read this, I'm going to try and pretty much summarize and brief you over it. Okay, so in order to get the access token, the first step that we need to do is we need to direct the user to this authorization URL. Okay, so basically it means that we need to, as soon as our application opens or whenever we're ready to get the authentication, we need to send the user to this URL. Now you notice how this URL is not it has these fields where obviously we need to input the details that we got from Instagram. So for example, over here in place of client ID, we would be putting this in, and similarly the client secret, well, not the client secret, but the redirect URI would come over here, and so on and so forth. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you one of the approaches that I initially took, which is not the same approach that we're going to take, but just for the sake of explaining it, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So one of the things that I did was I looked up this WebView class for Android, and a WebView is basically a view that displays web pages. And initially I thought, well, okay, so I want to display a web page, and why don't I go ahead and just use that? One thing here, since our application needs to connect to the internet, you do need to allow our application to use the internet, obviously. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this line, and you can go over to your Android manifest here. It's under manifests. Okay, so when you come over here, in fact, in case you didn't copy it, I'm going to go ahead and write it. You put this little less than sign and use this permission, and this very first one here, android.permission.internet, and yeah, so we have this one. At the same time, I also like to use another permission. Use this permission, Android permission access network state. Okay, so yeah, so these two, just go ahead and okay, so let me just, yeah, so we can simply just go ahead and do something like this, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, that just looks a little pretty. Okay, so these two allow the application to get the access to the network state. Okay, so they can check if the network state is on or off, and they also allow it to use the internet. Alright, so once you've gone ahead and added these two permissions, we can just close this, and that's going to stay there in the manifest. So the approach that I initially used was this one, where I did something like this little piece of code. URI is another Android class, okay? So you can go ahead and check that out as well if you want, but it's not very important. So I did something like this, URI equals to URI.parse, and in place of this example.com, I was placing in our newly constructed URL. So I mean, what I was doing was I was pretty much going back to the developer site. I was taking this code, and in place of the client ID, I was putting in my client ID. In the place of redirect URI, I was putting in my redirect URI. And then coming back here, I was putting all of this in here. Next, I was starting an intent, and inside this intent, I was passing the URI that I just created. And lastly, by this line, start activity bracket intent, I was starting my activity. And what this did was, as soon as I did that, it pretty much launched a browser, and sure enough, it took me to the Instagram page where it asked me, you know, blah 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 is looking for approval or login or whatever that I had to do. So that was initially very important for me, and what was important as well was that as soon as I clicked on approve, or as soon as I logged in, as it says, step 2 of this situation is that as soon as the user logs in, what it does is that it receives the redirect from Instagram. So the redirect, like we talked about in the first video as well, this is my redirect URI. So what's going to happen is that as soon as you log in, Instagram is going to redirect to the URI, okay, the redirect URI. But what it's going to do is towards the end of this redirect URI, it's going to add on this little bit of code. And this is what we need for step number 3. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's like a two-way handshake type situation, where first of all, you're going to show the user a login screen. The user is going to log in, right? In reply, the Instagram is going to redirect. You know, it's going to send this code on your redirect URI. You're going to find a way to somehow extract this code and later on exchange this code for the access token. Okay. So as soon as using this approach that I was discussing earlier on, as soon as you do that, and you can go ahead and you can feel free to try it out as well. So as soon as you do that, it basically redirects to the page, in this case my own website. Obviously that's not what we want, but the interesting thing was that when you looked at the address bar, sure enough you could see the code there. So if you want, you can go ahead and check it out yourself. However, that was I kind of fiddled around with it for a while, and the problem was obviously it was leaving my application, so it looked really ugly because I was having a lot of problem. As soon as, you know, the user, I mean, what was happening was it was opening it in a browser, and that's taking the user away from the website. And then I was just having all sorts of problems. Not only did it look ugly, but even if I found a way to come back into my application, it just wasn't very pretty and nice. So at that point in time, I started researching on the internet to see what's going on. There is an Android dialog class as well, which allows you to show some sort of dialog boxes inside your application. And while I was doing that, I found this really nice template, this ready-made template by someone, which was pretty much like a template for all RESTful APIs. It could be used for Twitter or you know, Instagram or whatever really that you want to use it to. And I'm extremely sorry because I cannot remember whose GitHub page I got it from. I've really tried to look at it, locate it again, but I haven't been able to do so. But as soon as I find out, I'm gonna link it in the description below. But at the moment, I did copy paste that code, and I edited it and I used it in my own project. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to my GitHub page. And my GitHub page is, it's also going to be in the description, but it's github.com/devmandark. And we're going to go and pick up this code from my GitHub page. We're going to copy and we're going to paste it. And if you're probably thinking at this moment that, you know, this is cheating or this is not the right way to do this, I'm just going to take a few minutes and I want to talk about this, alright? So when it comes to Android development, and when I was new to computer science and Android development in general, I was like, I was so used to writing all of my code in school and so on and so forth. But you know, there's a point where there's a lot of stuff that's been done already, and there's really no point in reinventing the wheel, so to speak, right? So if someone else has already done something and if it works, then now I'm at a point where whenever I'm working on a project, the first thing I do is whatever, look for some existing work, and if I can use that, then that is obviously the best way to go about it, right? You do not have to do everything from scratch as long as you're understanding everything. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna you're onto my okay. Let me just go ahead and do that again. So you come onto my GitHub page. Over here, you're gonna click on this Instagram API project. Once you're here, you're gonna click on App. You're gonna click on Source, and then you're gonna click on Main. And once you're here, you're going to click on this long line of address. Okay, so obviously you can go ahead and if you want to get the whole code right now, you can go and get it from the GitHub. As you can see, everything is here already done. So if you just want to get it and try and run it, the final version, and make changes to it as you require, you can obviously go ahead and do that as well. If you want to sit in and listen and understand everything as well and how I'm doing this, then you can also do that, which would obviously be very helpful for you. So like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to, for the time being, once you're here, I want you to open this authentication dialog. So this is one of the things that we're going to go ahead and copy. And I know it looks a little bit intimidating right now, but I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to explain most of this to you. And at the same time, what I'm trying to say is you don't always have to know entirely how things are working. And what I mean to say is you should know what's going on here, right? But you don't have to know every single line of code, right? I didn't write every single line of this code myself, but I know what's going on here. So the first step that we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and copy this and bring this into our project, and then we can try and digest it a little bit and see what's actually happening. And once you see the end result, it's going to start making a lot of sense as well. So the reason why I talked about the first approach, the slightly redundant approach, was simply to tell you that that's pretty much the same thing that this code is going to be doing, except what it's going to be doing is it's going to be doing it in a dialog, and it's not going to exit our application, right? It's not going to prompt the user to open your browser and suddenly show you the login page in the browser. It's all going to happen inside your application, and it looks really pretty like I showed you in the initial demo in part 1. So alright, so ignore this line. Alright, so go ahead and just copy this. Alright, we're going to copy this all the way up until here. Copy. And the name of this class is Authentication Dialog. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and just copy the name. Alright, so I want you to come over here and I want you to make a new Java class. We will call it Authentication Dialog. So this is our new class. Now we're all set to copy it. So we're gonna go ahead and copy this in here. Okay, so as soon as you do that, you're gonna get a whole ton of errors simply because a lot of them are going to be imports like we talked about. So everywhere that you have a missing import, you can just Alt plus Enter and you can start importing it. Alright, so this is another WebView class like the one that we saw earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep on importing it wherever I can. Okay, so I'm not really sure how to get all the imports all at the same time. Maybe I'm missing something, but just go ahead and keep doing that. Yikes. Okay. So we're getting an error here. This is obviously not an import, and I'll get to that in a second. This is actually our interface that we're also going to copy. I just want to make sure I got all the imports right. There should be imports here, cookie manager, imports here. Oops. So this is also an error. This is part of our interface, so we'll just get to that in a second. Let me see what other imports are required. Remove all cookie. What is this? On create. What is this? Did I import the wrong thing? I might have imported the wrong thing. Let me just go up here and remove cookies. Let's just go back here. Import. Interesting. Where is it? Manager. Yeah, I'm just deleting the imports because just in case I've made the wrong imports. Yeah. Okay, so it turns out I had screwed up the imports a little bit, but I think I've got everything going on. We're getting this error here, which we still need to copy and paste a little bit more code, and this one as well. Okay, so coming back to my GitHub page, we go back here, and you open this authentication listener.java, and just get this little bit of code as well. First, let's go ahead and copy this. We come back into our code, right-click, new Java class. We'll call it authentication listener, and this is going to be an interface. All right, so we can go ahead and copy and paste this code. Okay. So as soon as we do that, we have no more errors. Now, you're probably shouting at me. You're probably thinking, what the hell is this guy doing? Well, now let me try and explain a little bit of what's going on here, okay? So, like I said, I picked up this code from someone's GitHub page, and the link will be, sure enough, as soon as I find it, it will be in the description below. And this is an authentication dialog which pops up, and it's pretty much, it can be used for any RESTful web API. All right, so it's like just a standard way of pretty much getting authentication. All right, so we've gone ahead, and what I've done is basically I've gone ahead and edited the code a little bit from what it initially was, and I've put in the relevant information that we need. So as you can see, instead of some random boilerplate code or just some random code, I've put in the Instagram API link here. I've set it up to match our constants, as you can see here as well. So so like I said, the whole discussion that we had on making the URL. So basically, this is that URL that we need to send, that we need to send the user to. So if I come back and if I look on this developers page, this is the URL, and if you compare this URL with this one here, it's the exact same thing. All right. So you notice it's, Instagram.com, OAuth authorized client ID, OAuth authorized client ID, and so on and so forth. And I pretty much just inserted the missing informations. And what this dialog is doing is, I mean, look, you don't need to know the entire detail. I cannot stress this enough, okay? But if I were to basically just give you a very big, or like a very little overview of what's going on, so you can imagine that this authentication dialog, initially, so this is the constructor, right? So it's taking in a context, and it's taking in an authentication listener object, okay? So it's taking in a context, and it's taking a listener. Here on the onCreate method, that's where the authentication dialog, or the dialog box that pops up, is being created. So here are the settings for the spinner. That little box message which shows up sometimes when you load an application, and it says loading, and there's like a circle spinning around. So this is kind of what's going on over here. Over here, where is it? You can also see the dimensions for it, right? So whenever it's in landscape mode, the phone, these are the dimensions. When it's in portrait mode, these are the dimensions. So it's not a whole lot, it's not very difficult. Here, this method set up web view. It's pretty much setting up the web view inside the dialog box, right? It's using that MURL that we initialized up here, right? So that's what's pretty much is going on. over here. It's using a couple of different classes, right? And that's pretty much it. There's some of this code is deprecated, but I mean, I didn't really worry about that, and it won't really bother you, so just go ahead and just leave that there for the time being. And once you start looking at this later on, you'll realize that it looks a little overwhelming at first, but it's really not very difficult, especially if you have some experience with the dialog-based class. All right. Moving on to our authentication listener. Now this video has gone on very long, so I'm going to quickly explain this, and then I'm going to stop this video here, and we'll see the final results in the next video, and we'll go on from there. So this authentication listener is basically an interface. And an interface is basically nothing but a method. As you can see inside this interface, I have this void method on code received, which takes a string code as a parameter. So an interface is that's all it is. It's an interface, right? There is no implementation for this on code received, right? We're going to write the implementation for on code received in our main activity. All right, so we can what we're going to do is we need the implementation for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to our main activity, and what we're going to do is onto it we're going to add implements authentication listener. All right, okay. So as soon as I write that, this red little squiggly line comes on, and when you press Alt plus Enter for the quick fix, it gives you this implement methods. So what we're doing here is basically, this is just an interface, and inside this interface is a method, okay? But where the hell is the implementation for this method? It's nowhere to be found. So what we do is we go at the top of our main activity, and as soon as I write implements, you know, sometimes coding is just like English language. So our main activity is going to implement authentication listener. What is the authentication listener? It's this interface, and inside this interface there is a method called onCodeReceived. If main activity implements this authentication listener, that means that there should be a method called onCodeReceived inside my main activity. So as soon as I press Alt plus Enter for my quick fix, it prompts me, it tells me that I need to implement some methods which are part of authentication listener. As soon as I click on the implementation, on the methods, it gives me this onCodeReceived here. So as soon as I press OK, what it does is at the very bottom of my main activity, you see that it creates this method. And sure enough, that error at the top goes away. Alright, so this video has gone on too long. I'm going to pause the video here, and we'll pick up from here in the next video. I'll see you guys soon.